Hi, everyone. Hi, thanks for having me. So, visual design and graphic design on the web is sort of becoming standardized. Trends are being adhered to, like rules. The web's, in some areas, is looking the same the world over, and companies online are losing their identities. We also have the likes of Squarespace, Wix, and other instant website builders sort of encroaching on our business. And they'll continue to do so as they can offer more sophisticated solutions. And so in some cases, the web is becoming commoditized. It's like the fast food of design. So the supply and demand chain in 2016, we live in an exciting time. We're lucky enough to have platforms like Behance and Dribbble to showcase our work. There are thousands of designers. Supply is really high. And this obviously has the possibility to push down prices. So how do we survive as web designers beyond 2020? Why should anyone hire us? What makes us unique? How can we sort of command a premium price point for web design under the pressure of all that competition? So be the black sheep. We need to sort of take ourselves out of this race. We need to stop chasing the crowd. We need to create distinctive and engaging web design for our clients. It not only builds their identity, but in turn can build ours. So what I want to talk about today is a sort of a process that I apply to my work that I feel is sort of key to the success of those projects and ultimately key to getting more work that in this sort of field that I want to design in. So the first stage of that process is recognize. Help your client recognize that their identity is unique and a central foundation for creating distinctive and engaging web design. And at the beginning of a project, what I try and do is establish some common ground between myself and the client. And I'm really trying to sort of like make sure we're launching the project from the same launch pad. And I want them to understand that it's their identity, their sort of mission, their values, their reason for being that will be this touchstone, the cornerstone of this project, and it will be what we return to whenever we're making a design decision. And we want to sort of discourage emulation as well. So I don't know about you guys, but it's pretty common for clients to send you a bunch of links before you start a project. Actually, just really quickly, how many of you have like taken on web design projects yourselves or been freelancing or now or in the past? It's like loads of you. So you're probably all used to getting these emails with a bunch of links in of websites that they sort of see something of themselves in, perhaps. I work with a lot of startups, funded startups out in the United States, for example, and so the early mid-term companies. And so they often send these links, and it could even be to for a competitor, which isn't a really good idea. And if you're trying to like, create an identity for yourself online, if you base your ideas on someone else's, you're always one step behind. And if you're always one step behind, it's unlikely that your work will be original. And if your work's not original, it's unlikely to be distinctive. And it won't be creating your client a unique identity online, and it probably won't be a piece of work that you'll want to put into your portfolio, in turn build your own identity. So another thing is like I'm trying to make sure I avoid ambiguous feedback from clients. I don't know if you've received emails like this, but I sometimes get people saying things like, "Go crazy, you're the creative, can't wait to see what you come up with." Or, "I'll know it when I see it." Or is the worst one, "I know what I don't like." And these are obviously massively unhelpful pieces of feedback and give you no direction whatsoever. But it's also a telltale sign of the fact that they don't know what they want and they don't know who they are. And and it's this reason that I try and establish this level playing field at the beginning for us to find out who they are which brings me on to my next slide, which is extract. From the beginning of the project, I sort of interview my clients. I have a couple of Skype calls, and I just talk to them about everything that they do. I try and build a picture of who they are, their product or their service, what the mission is, why they started the company, their sort of values and attitudes to work, their passions and long-term vision. And I sort of try and be a method actor, really try and get into their shoes and, sort of try and feel like what it's to be them, because it gives you a really good understanding of who you're dealing with. And you're better placed to sort of tackle the project from a design perspective. And this discovery process, it's not only useful and essential for yourself as a designer, it's great for your client, because these people, your clients, often they're not thinking about who they are or what they are. They're just thinking about the service or product they're trying to deliver to their customers. So this is, often one of the only times they're really looking inward to try and work out who they are, what they really deliver, and how they want to tell the world about that. And that's quite an exciting process to see. And it also sort of really cements your relationship at this point and gives you you're in a great place to tackle the rest of the project. You could just grab a bunch of post-it notes, put a bunch of headers like products and service, the mission, the values, the goals. I mean, I don't actually do it like this. I just did it like this for the presentation. But I just typed them all into a notepad as I'm chatting to them. And as you do it, you sort of start to see patterns that under different titles, under different sections of their company, you'll see sort of patterns, recurring themes that pop up. And this takes us directly onto the next phase, which I would say is the most important part of the process. And this is sort of distill. And I sort of like to really think about it as distill and then storify. So we're looking for those common threads in our conversations. And I try and dilute it all down distill it all down, to keywords and phrases, trying to build their story in the minimal amount of words. And I sort of call it like a movie title strapline. And this strapline, which I often actually use in the design, is really this sort of the cornerstone of the design to sort of market that company. And it's our sort of compass that gives direction on the project. And to give you an example of how that works, this is a movie poster that I did design, and I apply the same theory to this too. So this is a vampire movie called Eat Local. It's directed by Jason Fleming and is due to come out sometime in 2017. I designed it before the film had been made. The film has been made now. So I had the script and I had the title. And it's set in a farmhouse in the English countryside. But to sort of get a poster to sort of hook up the title, have some sort of twist and a little story in there. A strap line is a great tool to utilize in a sense. So I basically start just by scribbling down tons of notes, ideas about eating well, dieting, things like that, whatever it is, and just make a whole bunch of random notes about what it could possibly be. And then slowly distill it down to less and less words. And the strap line I came up with in the end for this was from the farm to the fork, because it suddenly jumped into my head. Obviously, it relates to the Eat Local thing. And if I break out the two middle prongs of the fork, I'm left with what is something like two vampire teeth. And sort of happy accident from that as well, as it sort of looks like there's something scary in the middle of the fork as well, which isn't intentional, but I guess the whole thing together, it just has this it sort of begins to tell it gives you a hint of a story, and it has some meaning. And it's this process that I apply to web design projects. And I want to take you through a couple of sites I've designed in the past and share my thinking of why I did what I did. So the first one was a site I designed for a couple of years ago now for a UK-based web design agency called Mixed. And it's an interesting sort of prospect designing a web agency site. And I guess, they could have done it themselves. And they did actually build it. I just designed it for them and came up with the concept. But it's sometimes when you're so close to something and you're working with other clients, it's really hard to think of what you want to do for yourself. So, and also being a web design agency, the problem with that is every web design agency in the country is sort of made up of the same elements: people, ideas, and work. And so to create something that gives them an online identity and something distinctive, we have to you have to think about it a bit differently. So using the process, as I just described with the film poster, I did exactly the same with this. Went through scribbling down all the notes, and then slowly, once I've got those notes down like I did on the post-it notes a minute ago, I just sort of start scribbling stuff down related to all the things they've told me. And the reoccurring themes from Mixed were to do with a balance between form and function, because they did a lot of complicated web application stuff, but they also had a love for design and felt it was their sort of strength to balance these two things. And obviously in web design, this sort of whole balancing act between form and function has always been a hot topic. So I basically scribbled down these words. So I'm writing things down just like, it works, it just works, it looks great, aesthetics, merge aesthetic, function, where form meets function, beautiful function. And then in the end, I settled on beautiful form, perfect function. And so it's just distilled the sort of what I felt was their sort of core mission and value down to 4 words. And the great thing about these 4 words is it now gives me a theme to design around for their site. Their site will contain all the same stuff all other web design agencies' site have. They'll have their portfolio, their team, where their location, a bit about their story and values as a company. But to give them a strong visual identity online, these are the 4 words that I'm going to use. And so what I decided to do with these words was I just tried to think of a few simple objects that I felt encompassed those words. So I chose the pencil, and also a chair, a bicycle wheel, and a spoon. Just really simple things that I felt had a marriage between form and function. And when you land on the homepage of the site, it gives you delivers you a random version of one of these pages, whether it be a spoon or a pencil, etc. And it's just a bold visual that's telling a story, delivering a sort of a value of what they're all about, and taking it away really from the fact that essentially they're a web design agency and trying to give you a story of who they are, about their identity. And the great thing about it is obviously I can bring this theme back in and wrap it around the content through the entire site. So I can bring it back into this page when I'm talking about the design process. And then I've picked out a few other quotes that sort of worked with this whole theme. So the best design is the simplest one that works, for example. And it gave them a sort of an identity and purpose other than just being a web design agency. So the next site is a site that I designed this year. And it's a site for a company called Belief. And Belief are a culture and identity specialist who sort of their mission is to help companies articulate who they are and why they matter. And in a funny way, it's similar to what I'm talking about today, but the founder, Mark, of Belief does it on a sort of a much bigger scale right through entire companies. And the sort of going through the stages of this process I'm talking about, we saw eye to eye very quickly on the first stage. There was sort of almost no need to establish this common ground because we had it. We both were singing from the same sheet there. And but we were trying to think, how can we take this? It's quite an abstract thing to think about company culture and identity. And so it's, you know, you're sort of grappling around with ways to tell that story, make it interesting. And we settled on really centering around what a company is. And we came up with the analogy of a tree. Because obviously a tree has this trunk, a core to it, and the branches are different parts of the company, and the leaves essentially are the people that make that company up. So that was our central piece to this story. And throughout the site, visually I painted and sort of illustrated these leaves and this cross-section of a tree trunk to tell this story. And Mark he spent a lot of time crafting the copy for the site, and the two work really well together. There's also a page on the site called the Journey page, which is essentially what happens to a company when they go through this process. And to illustrate this journey, I used, using the leaves, the first part of the process is really about reflection. So a company will look at what they've been doing to that point. And so it's all about thinking about where you've come from and reflecting upon what your past achievements or your past failures, etc. And then I use pebbles to sort of direct the user down the page to the next stage in the process, which was reimagine. And to visualize this, I sort of created a sort of a collection of leaves in the shape of a phoenix sort of rising from the ashes. This to sort of signify new life in that company. And finally, taking it on to galvanized by belief, at the end of that process, you have the tree and all the colorful, people and parts of the company that make up that whole company. And it tells the story in a way without, because it'd be so easy to fall back and use stock pictures of people leaning over desks and looking at iPads and smiling through sort of glass windows and high-rise offices and stuff. But it also gives, so it tells the story of Mark's company, but it also sort of gives him a strong visual identity online for people to recognize him by. And we took this through to sort of more painted and illustrated content for his articles part of his site. He writes a couple of articles every month. And the response has been amazing to the combination of his writing and the visuals we've created for his site. So the next phase is characterize. And so after I've created this story that I'm designing around, you've obviously got content and typography and to think about. And so it's how do you apply style to it? How do you treat the typography? What colors do you use? Do you use texture or not? Because all of these things, create a tone of voice. And we're talking about communicating something to people. It's not just through words. It's through the visuals of the site. And this application of style can convey certain things about your company very, very quickly. So it really gives application of style a sort of a meaning, which is cool because in a couple of ways, because it actually has a function, and it sort of can take a little bit of this sort of weight off you creatively as well, because you're not just thinking, oh, what's my favorite color and what's my favorite typeface. You're thinking, why should I apply this typeface to this site? What does it say? what does it say to the user? Why should I use these colors? Why should I use these textures? And it's if you think about it like that, it's a helpful guide and takes a little bit of that creative pressure off you. So I'm going to share a couple of sites with you that I've designed to talk about characterization. The first one is I designed a sort of an adventure blog for a San Francisco-based company called Weekend Sherpa. And every week they send out a few adventures to the readers that they can do over the weekend. It's all based around California. So, and this was there was much less thinking about an overall story for this because it's such a content-heavy site that it didn't really need to think too much about that because obviously there's a lot of photographs and a lot of writing. But the characterization played a much bigger role here. So, you know, I'm using like the strapline for this, how do you adventure, was one they already had. So, but it's really just about thinking about how do you apply style to that. And I'm using the freehand paint because I'm trying to create this feeling of spontaneity of going on an adventure at the weekend and this sort of idea of this outdoorsiness and being out in nature. And the colors are sort of, you know, using earthly colors to reinforce the sort of outdoorsness and nature. And I also created a set of iconography, which was influenced by, you know, the trail signs you might find, or almost like badges for national parks. And the iconography that I was using was just all hand-painted with Indian ink and with a paintbrush. And it's just really essentially just supporting the content, supporting the message of adventure and exploration. And you can see from this screen here, this is one of the stories. The story itself is, you know, it's clear. It's, you know, there's still this balance here where, you know, I don't want to make all the mark making and splashes of paint and texture interfere with any of the content. It's just a matter of them working together and supporting each other. So another one, in complete contrast to this, I designed a site for a French-based digital agency called Craftsman. And these guys were, you know, they sort of innovators making products. And the base story we got for them was to these strap lines, digital scientist, digital explorer, digital visionary. And that was what gave me the reasons to create these illustrations of like the chemistry set up there and the mountain and outdoor scene. But in the digital aspect, for the application of style, I've obviously got this sort of computerized typeface. And my sort of, I guess, my sort of experience, whenever I think of digital, I just think of when I was a kid and I used to use a Spectrum. And so I just thought the 8-bit graphics to me is just what, you know, really resonated with me. And I can use these things throughout the site. And again, it gives them a unique feel that they can own, an identity they can own as an agency. And you can see as well as, you know, they're different companies and they're hopefully completely different visual outcomes. And which sort of brings me on to the last point in this process, which is much more of it's more of an outcome than a point in the process. It's the result of, hopefully the result of this process. By sort of applying this sort of way of thinking to when you're designing a website for someone, hopefully you're going to end up with, you know, creating each of your clients an identity that they can own online, identity that's really strong for them and conveys their message. But in turn, each project you do is building you a diverse body of work that you can put in your own portfolio, which then becomes your own identity. And at a time like this, I feel like it's never been more important to, I don't know, grab hold of sort of creativity. And to me, it's the last thing that, or it's something automated or computers will ever steal from us, because, and it's so that all things like Squarespace and, they're pretty complex things and can deliver some really good results. But in terms of creativity, that's something we can still own. So if you've been interested in sort of this process at all, I've created a poster which is sort of very quickly bullets each part of the process. And you can grab one out from that table over there in the foyer. But I just want to leave you with this thought. On the side of doing web design, I do a bit of photography and Instagram. And what I love about taking photographs is trying to recreate what it was like to be there at the time. Normally, I'm shooting on a phone and you'll just, a moment will fall upon you that you think, oh yeah, I've got to capture this. So you take a shot and later on you might go back to edit it. And it's very rare that the picture you take feels anything like what it was like to be there. And but what I think is quite important when you're editing a picture is that normally a picture is in there somewhere. It's just a matter of looking a bit closer, taking the right crop and editing the color a bit, and sometimes even exaggerating it. So you say you're almost trying to express what it felt like. It's not about necessarily creating a realistic image. It's more about how it felt to you. And to me, that's the same as design. No matter what a client comes to you with, initially, if you work with them and look a bit deeper, you can sort of end up supplying something that exceeds their expectations and builds them that unique online identity, and in turn builds yours. Thanks very much.